Hello everyone, welcome back to the Snark Library. I finally picked a name. I know that the name's been up since I posted all the videos, but this is the first video I've recorded since I picked the name. So yes, we are the Snark Library. I've got my tea, I've got my cat in my lap, we are ready to rock. And today we are going to be reading some Edgar Allan Poe. I found a great collection of all of his works on Project Gutenberg. Unfortunately, the cover just says The Raven. So in the interest of true advertising, we're going to start off with a poem today. We will be reading The Raven. And then we'll go from there. We'll see how much time we have. I definitely want to read some of his short stories, which are pretty freaky, generally speaking. Okay, so here we go. The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over a many quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books a crease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now to still the beating of my heart I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore?" Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon I heard again a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely this is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what threat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not an instant stopped or stayed he, but with mine of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be short and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marvelled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevance bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, What it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then, upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, but this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore, meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then, methought, the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by angels whose faint footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, cried I, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he have sent thee, respite, respite, and nepenthes from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthes, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell the soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a scented maiden whom the angels named Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back unto the tempest of the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadows on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, that's the end of the raven. There were so many parts in there I kind of wanted to, interrupt, but I feel weird interrupting poetry to be snarky. It's not the same as prose. I love that poem so much. I know everyone loves that poem so much, but just, I don't know, it's so long and I've tried to write poetry, and it's not easy, and it, womps up so well, you know? It starts so slow, and then it just gets more and more intense. And the writing doesn't really change. It just, the emotion gets so... Published in 1845. Wow, that's a long time ago. Word of the day, nepenthes, which I actually had to pause and look up how to pronounce, a drug described in Homer's Odyssey as banishing grief or trouble from a person's mind. So that's an excellent reference in there. So good. I've said it before and I will say it again. This is Angry Man Yells at Bird, the poem. We've all been there. We've all yelled at birds, I'm sure. Okay, I'm going to take a brief tea break now that we've got that excellentness out of the way. Okay, I did not realize how much Poe wrote. I know that he wrote a lot just from hearsay, but I'm used to all the, classic ones. But this book that I found is 5 volumes. So there's a lot to get through. And most of these short stories are longer and probably deserve their own stuff. But let's go through some of the shorter ones. I think we're gonna poem, short stories, and then end with a poem. Try to keep the video as long as it usually is. I have got a nice big cup of my jasmine tea, which I may have overbrewed again. Oh well, at least I won't run out. Princess was on my lap throughout that whole poem, just purring away. Hi. There you are. The key is that I'm wearing black today, so she wants to get her fur all over it, don't you? Okay, I do like The Mask of Red Death and The Cask of Amontillado, but I feel like everyone knows those, so let's read one of the more random ones. Let's see, Princess is here, so clearly we read... Oh, here we go, Princess. This one's about a cat. The Black Cat. For the most wild, yet most homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. Okay, every time somebody in a Poe story insists they're not mad, it means they are fat insane. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me, yet I will not attempt to expound them. To me they have presented little but horror, to many they will seem less terrible than Baroque. Hereafter, perhaps, some intellect may be found which will reduce my phantasm to the commonplace, some intellect more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than my own, which will perceive, in the circumstances I detail with awe, nothing more than an ordinary succession of very natural causes and effects. From my infancy I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals, and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With these I spent most of my time, and never was so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew with my growth, and in my manhood I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished an affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratification thus derivable. There is something in the unselfish and self-sacrificing love of a brute, which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent occasion to test the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere man. I married early, and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. They had a monkey? Okay, don't have monkeys as pets. This latter was remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black, and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusions to the ancient popular notion, which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point. I mention the matter at all for no better reason than that it happens just now to be remembered. I've had cats that it's just like, you are a person, you are a man who has been turned into a person. Not Princess, though, she's a pretty little kitty. I mean, she might be a princess who's enchanted to be a cat, for all I know. Oh my goodness, you're so beautiful. Oh God, she's cleaning her face in my lap right now, you guys. I can't even. I love her so much. Okay. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, though the instrumentality of the fiend intemperance, had, I blush to confess, experienced a radical altercation for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length I even offered her personal violence. What? Okay, I don't like you anymore. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when by accident or through affection they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length even Pluto, who was now becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. Oh, okay, you're an alcoholic. That's really sad. Oh, this is already horribly sad. One night, returning home, much intoxicated, from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him, when in his fright at my violence he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take flight from my body, and more than fiendish malevolence, gin-nurtured, thrilled every fibre of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife. No! Princess, cover your ears! Opened it and grasped the poor beast by the throat and deliberately cut one of his eyes from the socket? Oh, I think I picked the wrong story, fam. Oh, no. I blush, I burn, I shudder while I pen the damnable atrocity. Yeah, you better. Oh, no, this is horrible. When reason returned with... You got drunk and got up your cat! Oh my gosh. I'm so mad at this person. When reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the fumes of the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse, for the crime of which I had been guilty, but it was at best a feeble, equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess, and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but, as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me, but this feeling soon gave place to irritation, and then came, as if my final, irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of pervishness. Of this spirit philosophy takes no account. Yet I am not more sure that my soul lives than I am that pervishness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which gave direction to the character of man. Who has not 100 times found himself committing a vile or silly action for no other reason than because he knows he should not? Have we not a perpetual inclination in the teeth of our best judgment to violate that which is law, merely because we understand it to be such? This spirit of pervishness, does that mean contrary? Are we really gonna... Yeah, all right, let's have 2 words of the day. Perverseness. Second word of the day. Deliberately deviating from what is good. Perversity. This spirit of perverseness, I say, came to my final overthrow. It was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for wrong's sake only, that urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the offending brute. No, you're the brute. Oh my gosh. I forgot that pretty much all Poe protagonists are horrible people. Oh no. One morning in cool blood I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at my heart, hung it because I knew that it had loved me and because I felt it had given me no reason of offense, hung it because I knew that in doing so I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. Wow. This is horrible. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. I hope it was your wife setting you on fire for being a frickin' psycho. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself thenceforth to despair. Yeah, maybe don't kill your cat. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Princess. This was a mistake. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity, but I am detailing a chain of facts, and wish not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the rooms. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall a dense crowd were collected, and many persons seemed to examining a particular portion of it with very minute and eager attention. The words strange, singular, and other similar expressions excited my curiosity. I approached, and saw as if graven in bas relief upon the white surface the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope around the animal's neck. Ooh, that is spooky. Oh, that's pretty spooky. When I first beheld this apparition, for I could scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror were extreme, but at length reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd, by someone of whom the animal must have been cut from the tree, and thrown, through an open window, into my chamber. This had probably been done with a view of arousing me from sleep. The falling of other walls had compressed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the lime of which, with the flames and the ammonia from the carcass, had then accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. That is almost as crazy an explanation as it just randomly appearing because of ghosts. What? What in the Rube Goldberg? Although I thus readily accounted to my reason, if not altogether to my conscience, for the startling fact just detailed, it did not the less fail to make a deep impression upon my fancy. For months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and during this period there came back into my spirit a half-sentiment that seemed, but was not remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me among the vile haunts which I now habitually frequented, for another pet of the same species, and of somewhat similar appearance, with which to supply its place. I have absolutely no patience for unrepentant alcoholics who do horrible things. Oh, dear. Well, Princess is still in my lap, so it can't be that bad. No, she's buzzing. One night, as I sat, half stupefied, in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin, or of rum, which constituted the chief furniture of the apartment. I had been looking steadily at the top of this hogshead for some minutes, and what now caused me surprise was the fact that I had not sooner perceived the object thereupon. I approached it, and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every respect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I at once offered to purchase it of the landlord, but this person made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caresses, and, when I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once, and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. His poor wife, is she okay? No, clearly not okay. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. You cock! What the f***? This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but I know not how or why it was. Its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature. A certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty prevented me from physically abusing it. Good. I did not for some weeks strike or otherwise violently ill-use it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing, and to flee silently from its odious presence, as from the breath of a pestilence. Ugh. I hate this guy so much. Princess is twitching in her sleep. Oh, this is going to be a princess-heavy episode, you guys. Oh my gosh. Oh, she's so cute. Oh, Princess, I need a break. I need to know how cute and wonderful you are. Yep, there it is. Okay. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. I am almost ashamed to own, yes, even in this felon's cell, I am almost ashamed to own that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to conceive. My wife had called my attention more than once to the character of the mark of white hair of which I have spoken, and which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, although large, had been originally very indefinite, but by slow degrees nearly imperceptible, and which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful, it had at length assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the representation of an object that I shudder to name, and for this above all I loathed and dreaded, and would have rid myself of the monster had I dared. It was now, I say, the image of a hideous, of a ghastly thing, of the gallows. Oh, mournful and terrible engine of horror and of crime, of agony and of death. And now I was indeed wretched beyond the wretchedness of mere humanity, and a brute beast, whose fellow I had contemptuously destroyed, a brute beast to work out for me, a man fashioned in the image of the high God. Oh God, I hate this guy so much of insufferable woe. Alas, neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of rest any more. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the later I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face, and its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare that I had no power to shake off, encumbered eternally upon my heart. He's sitting on you because he loves you. You don't deserve that love. Oh my goodness. Beneath the pressure of torments such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. There is no good within you, you horrible person. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, the darkest and most evil of thoughts. The moodiness of my usual temper increased a hatred of all things, and of all mankind, while from the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outbursts of a fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. No, honey, take the cat and leave him. Take the cat and leave him. Oh, no. One day she accompanied me, upon some household errand, into the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. You live in the cellar? Okay. The cat followed me down the steep stairs, and nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe, and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal, which, of course, would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp, and buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This guy is so nuts. What the hell am I reading? Oh my god. Hold on. I need to take a... Oh my god. Okay. I officially forgive the husband in the yellow wallpaper. At least he's not this guy. Oh my gosh. Oh, but... I didn't expect to be so heavily traumatized today, you guys. This is horrible. I need to remember to put a trigger warning on this video. Oh, wow, alright. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith, and with entire deliberation, to the task of concealing the body. Wow. I knew that I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. Many projects entered my mind. At one point I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. At another I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar. Again I deliberated about casting it in the well in the yard, about packing it in a box as if merchandise with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than either of these. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. I'm sorry, the monks in the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. Is that a thing that monks did? I don't trust this guy. That's really crazy. All of this is really crazy. For a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed, and had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster, which the dampness of the atmosphere had prevented from hardening. Oh, you guys have been living in that? No wonder you're going, oh, you are already nuts. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection caused by a false chimney or fireplace that had been filled up and made to resemble the red of the cellar. I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, and wall the whole up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. And in this calculation I was not deceived. By means of a crowbar I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body inside the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while with little trouble I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. Having procured mortar, sand, and hair with every possible precaution. Okay, I can only assume that hair is a usual thing for brickwork. I prepared the plaster, which could not be distinguished from the old, and with this I very carefully went over the new brickwork. When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. The rubbish on the floor was picked up with minutest care. I looked around triumphantly, and said to myself, "Here at least, then, my labor has not been in vain." It's funny how murdering his cat traumatized him horrendously, but murdering his wife was just an oopsie-daisy. Good Lord. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. I'm sure you had. Had I been able to meet with it at the moment, there could have been no doubt of its fate, but it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus for one night at least since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a free man. The monster, in terror, had fled the premise forever. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. Even a search had been instituted, but of course nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future felicity as secured. Everyone probably assumes you ran away from you because you are a psycho drunkard. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came, very unexpectedly, into the house, and proceeded again to make rigorous investigation of the premises. Secure, however, in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatsoever. The officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I quivered not in a muscle. My heart beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. I walked the cellar from end to end. I folded my arms upon my bosom, roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say, if but one word, by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last, as the party ascended the steps, "I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house." In the rapid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. I may say an excellently well-constructed house. These walls— "Are you going, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together, and here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with a cane which I held in my hand upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of the wife of my bosom. They were leaving. Oh my God! But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the arch-fiend. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows struck into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, a cry at first muffled and broken, like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and contemptuous scream, utterly anomalous and inhuman, a howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of hell, conjointly from the throats of the damned in their agony and of the demons that exult in the damnation. Of my own thoughts it is folly to speak. Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant the party upon the stairs remained motionless, through extremity of terror and of awe. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb. Woo-hoo-hoo! Oh, wow, Princess moved and I am just covered in fur. Oh my gosh. There is a carpet here. Are you shedding? Okay, yeah, walk away. Oh my goodness. That was horrible. Oh, I'm glad cat number 2 was okay. Good for him. Good for him going and making sure that awful, awful man went to be killed. Oh, what a terrible story. Oh my God. I mean, really, really well written, but just like, that was flipping traumatizing. Oh no. Okay. Well, hey, we got through it. We're gonna have a tea break. Okay, yeah, the moral of the story is, don't be mean to cats. Oh my gosh. How could you? Alright, let's take a look here. What is it with Edgar Allan Poe and walling people up? Because I know that happens in the Cask of Amontillado. I'm sure it happens elsewhere. He does like walling people up, doesn't he? Okay, tea has been sipped. Let's read the oval portrait. The chateau into which my valet had ventured to make forcible entrance, rather than permit me, in my desperately wounded condition, to pass a night in the open air, was one of those piles of congled gloom and grandeur which have so long frowned among the Apennines, not less in fact than in the fancy of Mrs. Radcliffe. To all appearance it had been temporarily and very lately abandoned. We established ourselves in one of the smallest and less sumptuously furnished apartments. It lay in a remote turret of the building. Its decorations were rich, yet tattered and antique. Its walls were hung with tapestry and bedecked with manifold and multiform armorial trophies, together with an unusually great number of very spirited modern paintings in frames of rich golden arabesque. In these paintings, which depended from the walls not only in their main surfaces, but in very many nooks which the bizarre architecture of the chateau rendered necessary, in these paintings my incipient delirium, perhaps, had caused me to take deep interest, so that I bade Pedro to close the heavy shutters of the room, since it was already night, to light the tongues of a tall candelabrum which stood by the head of my bed, and to throw open far and wide the fringed curtains of black velvet which enveloped the bed itself. I wished all this done that I might resign myself, if not to sleep, at least alternatively to the contemplation of these pictures, and the perusal of a small volume which had been found upon the pillow, and which purported to criticize and describe them. Oh, do we not get to know why and how you're injured? Like, did you get stabbed? What? Long I read, and devotedly I gazed. Rapidly and gloriously the hours flew by, and the deep midnight came. The position of the candelabrum displeased me, and outreaching my hand with difficulty, rather than disturb my slumbering valet, I placed it so as to throw its rays more fully upon the book. You are going to die in a fire. But the action produced an effect altogether unanticipated. The rays of the numerous candles, for there were many, now fell within a niche of the room which had hitherto been thrown into deep shadow by one of the bedposts. So I thus saw in vivid light a picture all unnoticed before. It was the portrait of a young girl just ripening into womanhood. I glanced at the painting hurriedly, and then closed my eyes. Why I did this was not at first apparent, even to my own perception. But while my lids remained thus shut, I ran over in my mind my reason for so shutting them. It was an impulsive movement to gain time for thought, to make sure that my vision had not deceived me, to calm and subdue my fancy for a more sober and more certain gaze. In a very few moments I again looked fixedly at the painting. That I now saw aright I could not and would not doubt, for the first flashing of the candles upon that canvas had seemed to dissipate the dreamy stupor which was stealing over my senses, and to startle me at once into waking life. The portrait, I have already said, was that of a young girl. It was a mere head and shoulders, done in what is technically termed a vignette manner, much in the style of the favourite heads of Sully. The arms, the bosom, and even the ends of this radiant hair melted imperceptibly into the vague yet deep shadow which formed the background of the whole. The frame was oval, richly gilded and filigreed and moresque. As a thing of art nothing could be more admirable than the painting itself, but it could have been neither the execution of the work nor the immortal beauty of the countenance which had so suddenly and so vehemently moved me. Least of all could it have been that my fancy, shaken from its half-slumber, had mistaken the head for that of a living person. I saw at once that the peculiarities of the design, of the vignetting, and of the frame must have instantly dispelled such idea, must have prevented even its momentary entertainment. Thinking earnestly upon these points, I remained for an hour perhaps, half sitting, half reclining, with my vision riveted upon the portrait. At length, satisfied with the true secret of its effect, I fell back within the bed. I had found the spell of the picture in an absolute lifelikeness of expression, which at first startling, finally confounded, subdued, and appalled me. With deep and reverent awe I replaced the candelabrum in its former position. The cause of my deep agitation being thus shut from view, I sought eagerly the volume which discussed the paintings and their histories. Turning to the number which designated the oval portrait, I there read the vague and quaint words which follow. She was a maiden of rarest beauty, and not more lovely than full of glee, and evil was the hour when she saw and loved and wedded the painter. He, passionate, studious, austere, and having already a bride in his art, she a maiden of rarest beauty, and not more lovely than full of glee, all light and smiles, and frolicsome as the young fawn, loving and cherishing of all things, and hating only the art which was her rival, dreading only the palette and brushes and the unwonted instruments which deprived her of the countenance of her lover. It was thus a terrible thing for this lady to hear the painter speak of his desire to portray even his young bride. But why would you marry the painter? What a weird match. But she was humble and obedient, and sat meekly for many weeks in the dark, high-turreted chamber where the light dripped upon the pale canvas only from overhead. But he, the painter, took glory in his work, which went on for hour to hour, and from day to day, and he was a passionate and wild and moody man, who became lost in reveries, so that he would not see that the light which fell so ghastly in that lone turret withered the health and the spirits of his bride, who pined visibly to all but him. Yet she smiled on and still on, uncomplainingly, because she saw that the painter, who had high renown, took a fervid and burning pleasure in his task, and wrought day and night to depict her who so loved him, yet who grew daily more dispirited and weak. He's staring at her and painting her all day. How does he not notice this? He'd have to change his palette colors. And in sooth, some who beheld the portrait spoke of its resemblance in low words, as of a mighty marvel, and a proof not less of the power of the painter than of his deep love for her whom he depicted so surprisingly well. But at length, as the labor drew nearer to its conclusion, there were admitted none into the turret, for the painter had grown wild with ardor of his work, and turned his eyes from canvas merely even to regard the countenance of his wife, and he would not see the tints which he spread upon the canvas were drawn from the cheeks of her who sat beside him, and when many weeks had passed, and but little remained to do, save one brush upon the mouth and one tint upon the eye, the spirit of the lady again flickered up as the flame within the socket of the lamp, and then the brush was given, and then the tint was placed, and for one moment the painter stood entranced before his work, which he had wrought, but in the next, while he yet gazed, he grew tremulous, and very pallid, and aghast, and crying with a loud voice, "This indeed life itself!" turned suddenly to regard his beloved. She was dead. Boom. End of story. Oh, I'm sorry, Princess, did I scare you? She's just been with me this whole time. It's so lovely. Do you like Edgar Allan Poe, Princess? Is he your favorite? Apparently Poe is her favorite. That is the end of the oval portrait. Wow. 2 short stories. We're going to wrap it up with a poem. Oh, golly. Should we do one of the more well-known poems? You know, we started with a well-known poem. Let's grab a poem that I have not heard of before. The Sleeper. Okay, The Sleeper. At midnight in the month of June, I stand beneath the mystic moon. An opiate vapor, dewy dim, exhales from out her golden rim, and softly dripping drop by drop upon the quiet mountain top, steals drowsily and musically into the universal valley. The rosemary nods upon the grave, the lily lolls upon the wave. Wrapping the fog about its breast, the ruin moulders into rest. Looking like Lethe, see, the lake, a conscious slumber seems to take, and would not for the world awake. All beauty sleeps, and lo, where lies, her easement open to the skies, Irene with her destinies. O lady bright, can it be right, this window open to the night, the wanton airs from the tree-top, laughingly through the lattice drop, the body's airs a wizard wrote, flit through thy chamber in and out, and wave the curtain canopy so fitfully, so fearfully, above the closed and frigid lid, neath which thy slumbering soul lies hid, that o'er the floor and down the wall, like ghosts the shadows rise and fall. O lady dear, hast thou no fear? Why and what art thou dreaming here? Sure thou art come per far-off seas? I wonder to those garden trees. Strange is thy pallor, strange thy dress, strange above all thy length of tress, and this all solemn silentness. The lady sleeps. Oh, may her sleep, which is enduring, so be deep. Heaven have her in its sacred keep, this chamber changed for one more holy, this bed for one more melancholy. I pray to God that she may lie forever with unopened eye, while the dim sheeted ghosts go by. My love, she sleeps, oh, may her sleep, as it is lasting, so be deep. Soft may the worms about her creep, far in the forest dim and old. For her may some tall vault unfold, some vault that oft hath flung its black and winged panels fluttering back, triumphant o'er the crested palls of her grand family funerals. Some speculary, remote alone, against whose portal she hath thrown, in childhood may an idle stone, some tomb foremote whose sounding door so ne'er shall force an echo more. Thrilling to think, poor child of sin, it was the dead who groaned within. And that is the end of The Sleeper. You know, I should have realized as soon as we started that it's a Poe story, so it's going to be about a dead woman. Yeah, actually, every single one of the things we've read today have been about dead women. Princess. Aww. Nevermore would be a great name for a raven. That's one of the things I wanted to interrupt that poem with. Well, that is our taste of Edgar Allan Poe's work. If you enjoyed listening to this, and clearly Princess enjoyed because she stayed throughout the entire thing, a little one. If you enjoyed this, let me know and we can read more Poe. And if we want to read some more classic Poe, we can do that. There's definitely some of the better known stuff that's pretty popular that we can take a crack at. I hope you weren't too traumatized, and I will see you all next time. Bye!